Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. I'm your host, Christine Eck. Here at the Center for Sacred Window Studies, we explore and expand on conscious postpartum care. We navigate the overlap of caring for others and caring for ourselves. We honor the transitions, not only in giving birth, but in being alive. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Hello, welcome to the conversation. I'm Christine. I'm the director of the Center for Sacred Window Studies. I'm so happy to welcome my dear, dear friend, Gal Gallucci, to our podcast space. Gal is a conscious postpartum caregiver. She's a body worker, and we are here today to talk about a very important hat that she wears. Gal is a sexological body worker. She's also a mama to 3. And Gal has taught me a lot and is still teaching me about this important field of sexological body work that she is incorporating into her postpartum caregiving practice, into the general awareness for postpartum health. And this was a really great opportunity for us to have this conversation that is going to be widely listened to so that we can be part of that educating and that raising awareness that healing after birth is also about healing our ability to be intimate in all the ways that we would like to and to experience the full capacity of our bodies in the way that we as humans have every right to feel. So, Gal, thank you so much for being with me.
Yeah, Christine, thank you so much for the invitation. As I mentioned to you, really any excuse to connect with you and have a conversation with you, be in container with you is a yes for me. So it's an honor to be here with the Sacred Windows Institute and to have a platform and an opportunity to share what this body of work is and how it complements. It's an invaluable tool to professional birth workers.
It is. And I feel like the understanding of it has developed for me over the past year as I've learned more about it from you. We were so lucky to have you at our summer in-person embodiment retreat where we were training students in postpartum body work from an Ayurvedic perspective, postpartum cooking from an Ayurvedic perspective, and all of these conscious care tools that are so integral for whole healing after a transition, such as birth in particular. And so you were able to really sit with us for an extremely potent teaching session and embodiment session, I would say, of what sexological body work is and why we as caregivers need to know about it, and how honestly the whole conversation around healing in this manner post-birth is like literally missing from the conversation for doulas, for people who are giving birth, for the medical profession. Like it's just not happening until there is something going wrong, something that is not feeling okay, in which an individual might reach out and ask someone for help. But as birth cannot be separated from the sexual experience, it really cannot be moved apart from who we are as sexual beings. So it blows my mind that the topic of how to heal and become a sexual person again in the ways that feel like we're most ourselves after birth, um, it just needs to be there, and you're doing this important work. So I just want to start out with asking you, I've done my homework before the conversation and looked up sort of a definition, but in your own words, tell us what sexological body work is.
Mhm. Well, what I want to say sets what makes sexological bodywork and its application really unique to, we'll say, pelvic floor therapy is that if you went to see a pelvic floor therapist, which is most likely the referral that you would receive from your nurse midwife, if you came in and you discussed complications, vaginal lacerations at the time of birth, painful penetrative sex, postpartum. If, there's numerous reasons, but those are a couple of really common reasons why you might get a referral to a pelvic floor therapist. What makes a sexological worker really unique and distinct from the pelvic floor therapist, for instance, would be that in our training, there is also a very direct route in supporting our client linking back to arousal and ushering in sexual health right alongside reproductive health or pelvic floor therapies. What is the value of doing or focusing just on Kegels, for instance, when there's an entire network of tissue and nerve endings and different pathologies and different goals, perhaps different concerns and different goals that a client might have. The sexological body workers, our training is all directly linked to how we can enhance and understand ourselves as erotic beings. So there's an educational piece to it. There's a clinical piece to it, clinical applications. And then there's a psychological component to it as well. And all of these, so it's a very holistic approach to understanding ourselves as erotic beings. And the sexological body worker is a guide to their client in bringing that all together in a very holistic manner and linking them back to their arousal and understanding what that even is. Like, what is an arc of arousal? What could be causing pain? What could be causing a barrier? Does it live in the emotional body? Does it live in the physical body? Does it live in the psyche? And bringing that all together.
It's so beautiful. And it really honestly is mind-blowing in how beautifully whole it is, because there are so many components to reintroducing being and identifying as a sexual being after we've gone through birth. That's a really big ask for the body for so many people. And when we may not have really fully embodied who we are as that sexual person prior to getting pregnant and having a baby. So the opportunity to really acknowledge that that aspect of being is not usually prioritized in a healthy and balanced way anyway in society. And
Mhm.
certainly for the way we grow up and the way we're introduced to puberty and sex education and all of the ways of knowing our bodies as these growing beings, it feels to me like a really huge missing piece to the puzzle. So I'm going to read this definition that I found, and I would love for you to kind of just walk me through it a little bit. This is from sexologicalbodyworkers.org. Sexological bodywork is a body-based educational modality that supports individuals, couples, and groups to learn to direct their erotic development and to deepen their erotic well-being and embodiment. Sexological bodywork facilitates the ability to change limiting habits,
Mhm.
unwind and release what is no longer supportive, resensitize the body and create a more expansive erotic state that integrates both body and mind.
Mhm. Yeah. And I'm curious about how that lands in you reading it. You know, most humans don't even know that this body of work exists. And so I'm curious how that information like reaches your eyes and how it lands in your body when you think, like, does it feel like it's full of possibility? Does it feel complicated? Do you wonder how you even began with this path? I'm just
Well,
curious.
I did, and I'm glad you asked me that because I think I can shed a little personal experience light on this. So I, have always loved you and your work and the connection that I've had with you since meeting you several years ago. And, when you came to the retreat and, we had arranged for you to give this presentation and to help us understand more about this, I really had kind of an eye-opening experience that really hit me in a very deeply emotional place that I wasn't expecting to go to. And it was kind of all around recognizing my own experience birthing my first child and having a pretty significant tear that was pretty traumatic and having it stitched back up in the moment. And then the following months, kind of healing from it and really struggling to be comfortable during sex and also needing to repair some granular tissue. It's like it was a very surprising, like not something that I had obviously ever gone through, but something that was extremely scary and painful, and something that a little bit was kind of poo-pooed, like, oh, your baby's healthy, you did great, you're fine. Um, which, yeah, I was, and my baby was healthy, but this thing happened and it was a lot. And so going through the session that we had as a group and kind of hearing you speak and then hearing other people reflect and really allowing for our own connections to be made into what the meaning of this therapy is for people who have gone through whatever their story was at birth. And for me, that whole experience came flooding back, and I realized that I don't have to be stuck with a certain amount of healing or debilitation from that birthing experience and what my body went through. I actually have the possibility to fully heal and repair my tissues to the point where they're not still scarred, they're not still damaged by what happened. And that made me cry. Like I really started to cry when I realized that I could have had this type of work then, but it's also not too late for me to have that work now, all these years later.
Mm. Yeah, there wasn't a dry eye in our circle when you shared your experience with the group, and it was such a profoundly touching moment for, I think, for each and everybody who sat in circle that night, because this this body of work and what we're talking about in particular here is two parts: scar tissue remediation, which is a huge component of sexological body work, which a pioneer in the field, who teaches anatomy and physiology with the Institute of Somatic Sexology. And so there's probably, I want to say, about a dozen schools globally that certify sexological body workers, and somatic sex educators. Ellen Heed is this brilliant educator who has taken scar tissue remediation to a whole other level. She has a certification course that primarily sexological body workers and somatic sex educators are in her programs, but there's also various backgrounds. And she has a particular interest, like all her PhD was all focused on postpartum work and the demographic that we serve. So Ellen Heed with, I believe, STREAM, STREAM, STREAM program. It's a deep, deep dive into the nervous system, the human nervous system, and developing a professional skill set to support and offer scar tissue remediation, not just to the pelvic floor, but to the entire body, and understanding how scars have an emotion and a frequency that they carry in the body, and how that impacts all the tissues in the body and the functionality of organ systems and anatomy and physiology. I mean, it's gross anatomy. This educator is probably one of the most phenomenal minds I've ever encountered. But yeah, in sharing your story, I have a similar experience of the very first time that sexological bodywork came to me, or I began studying it and then was in an intensive, having my body and my actually receiving a vulva mapping session, was 20 years postpartum. I believe it was 19 or 20 years postpartum from my firstborn's birth. And I had significant tearing from his birth. And I was experiencing a vulva mapping session. And never had I ever had my vulva touched in a way that was non-sexual, first of all, or that wasn't so sterile in its application of having a speculum, like, like a medical procedure done. Or it was the very first time that I was in the hands of someone who was going to take their time to educate me about where there was pleasure potential in my tissues, where there was numbness in my tissues, which we call sensation amnesia in this body of work, and where there was pain. And to start to create a pathway. And mapping allows you to name it is to claim it. So in mapping, you start to realize oh, there's pleasure potential here. There's numbness here. There's pain here. And it gives you a roadmap. It gives you a map to start to amplify every one of those areas with more conscious awareness. So, okay, if there's pain here, what can I do? Oh, there's a protocol for that? Beautiful. Oh, it involves castor oil, and this is what that protocol looks like. There's numbness here. Well, I wonder if I palpate it in this particular way, if I can bring sensation back in. Oh, there's pleasure potential here. Well, I wonder if I stimulate and add different, techniques, how I can maybe even amplify that. So it is a way of ushering in and folding in and amplifying sensation. We are all sensory beings. And so to be able to know these very intricate parts of ourselves and have a solution available and a relationship, a budding relationship with our own vulvas it's so transformative. It begins to inform everything, your creativity, your energy, your agency, your voice. I mean, we can just spiral off into so many different areas, but then there's that esoteric, that energetic connection between the vocal cords and the vulva being almost identical anatomical structures. And so again, by naming is claiming, when you develop that pathway and that relationship to your vulva, it really informs your ability to speak more authentically, to be more expressive, to be more in your power and authentic expression. It's just, I don't know. I feel like I spiraled in so many different directions, but that's just to give you one example of like vulva mapping as a modality, which is one of numerous modalities that are applied with sexological bodywork.
I think that's such a beautiful way to begin, really, to just, in this introductory conversation is to really highlight, and I actually said this like at the very beginning of our chat before we were recording this conversation, is it's like when things become clear, when we really sit with and know ourselves, and we're not shying away, or we're not trying to be something that doesn't feel right for us, or we're kind of ignoring the pieces that maybe we're a little bit afraid of, that brings with it so many. It's what I said earlier, is that it's like the quickest way to cut off flow of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
And so as I'm listening to you speak, I'm really seeing and feeling that connection. And I think society and women as a whole we've, historically been very cut off from our sexuality. We've been taught that it's bad. We've been taught that it's shameful. We've been taught that, to really embrace it, that we haven't been invited to freely embrace it. And so this permission, this empowerment, this, I guess, affirmation that every part of our bodies as human beings is perfect, and every sensation that we have is part of the human experience, and to fully embrace it and fully understand the body that we're given is to completely open the flow to possibility. And I would 100% agree with you that as we love and heal and give attention to our pelvic floor, especially as this amazing place of origin in life, what are the possibilities for how we then can heal fully postpartum and come into parenting and living in this, vibrant, sunshine time of life in the most fullest, strongest, most confident way possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love in the postpartum period specifically, I really love offering the families that I work with um, options and ideas for how does a couple perhaps really nurture intimacy in the early days, and understanding that intimacy is different than sexuality. They complement each other, but when penetrative sex is off the table and your body is healing for a minimum of 6 to 8 to 10 weeks, depending on the birth, but we're going to say somewhere between 2 to 3 months, when penetrative sex is completely off the table, how, if a couple really does value how their relationship and their intimate connection is nourished, if they want that as part of the postpartum plan and that's important to them, offering suggestions and ideas for that is a remarkable resource. And it, in my opinion, just needs to be funneled in to, like, there's already so many stresses on the relationship. So how can we really shine a light there where perhaps, it could be as simple as maybe for the birthing mother, maybe her spouse or partner is taking an instrumental role in creating or running the bath for her, and anointing her with some oils afterwards and giving her a massage that might even include breast massage. Maybe he's taking an active role where he's still in contact with the body that he loves so much in these erogenous zones, but it's not translating to we're having sex or I'm super aroused, but it's this very beautiful, intimate bubble that they're in, and he's nourishing her and he's receiving something in exchange, which is really sacred to him. And then vice versa, like perhaps, what identifying what maybe his needs are and what he would really like to receive. And maybe, maybe it's a gentle, maybe it's some caressing of the inner thighs. Maybe it's, some specific words. Maybe it's a particular playlist or a film that they're watching together. Ways that we can intentionally create intimate containers for couples to down regulate and co-regulate in and be in relation with one another, and maybe even having a conversation about like, and when we are able to usher sex back in, here are some of the fears that are coming up around that for me, and that here's some words of affirmation I might need, or here are some ways that my body might need to be approached so that I feel safe, or maybe we need to go at this really slow and, safe words. Like there's a whole artistry to like identifying what the needs are and having effective communication through that entire healing process. Yeah.
It's so, and the relationship that's formed with a family and their doula, this is a really natural place for these questions and conversations to come in. I know for me, it was, my midwives who brought up that conversation with me, and it felt really nourishing that somebody was thinking about that and wanted me to begin thinking about that. And the other thing that comes up is, I think, guidance around um, the different possibilities. It feels like the fear of penetrative sex is so real, and so kind of helping couples to think outside of that one end expectation um, can really usher in so much more freedom and nourishment and safety, um, which I feel like so many people really do benefit from being walked and supported through that. Um, yeah,
Mhm.
I'm curious what you're.
Exposing what the common myths are. It's a really common myth, even in like last trimester and in couple dynamics, for the man to think that if they have sex that he might induce labor, or the water bag might break, or he might hurt her, or there's so much fear around that. It is such a common myth in couples that I've worked with and all the research that I've done. And so, I think it's a really important part of the advocacy and the education that we do as a somatic sex educator and sexological body worker, to go, so what's in the room with us right now? Or how do you feel when you're getting your cervix checked? do you like, should we consider that in the birth plan? Like how many times you want a check throughout labor? How has being checked so regularly throughout your prenatal period, how has that affected you? Do you notice, what do you notice when you're on an exam table? What could be more supportive for you? Does the lighting need to be shifted? Does the, speculum need to be warm? What things need to happen to bring you into a safer space that maybe like, so there's far more than just a sexual history that you're wanting to look at with your clients, but very just developing an artistry around consent. Like, what are you consenting to? What do you notice happens in your body at these, these different times? What, yeah. And then again, like exploring myths, like why does penetrative sex feel scary to you? What aspect? Tell me a little bit about your birth. Was there a tearing? Because some of it's psychological. It can be like, well, I also just had a baby, and there's so much shame that women feel around the idea of being tight, right? Or how having a baby has dramatically changed everything, and maybe they have fear around how their partner might feel about their vagina after giving birth. So yeah, there's so many fine details that are going to be unique to each client that you're working with, that have kind of these overarching general myths, misconceptions that can really be debunked with proper advocacy and education.
What drew you to this field?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things. I really think that this work called me. When I look back, I'm amazed at how, I became a mother the day after I turned 22. I had 3 weeks prior earned my degree in cultural anthropology. And although I'm from New Mexico, I'm Spanish, Italian, I have a huge network of a lot of support and extended family. And I realized that although I had what I think a minority of women in North America have in terms of support, postpartum, there were questions like, how the heck do I reconcile sexuality and motherhood? How do I walk as the mother and the erotic? And like I had all of these questions, and there was nowhere to go. I had no idea how to navigate motherhood and womanhood. And there was a lot of, again, like I tore pretty substantially. And I felt like I was blown off as like, well, I mean, that's just it's part of giving birth. Like, welcome, like that's your initiation. You're going to walk with scars. You're going to walk with pain. You're going to walk with this discomfort. And none of that was satisfactory to me. And so my anthropology, the anthropologist in me started to get really curious about a global perspective to postpartum care, prenatal and postpartum care. And again, because sex education is almost non-existent and so distorted and taboo, I just was relentless in my search to find mentors and teachers and pioneers who were doing the work in a very respectable, academic, and spiritual manner. And fast forward many, many years later, I discovered the Institute of Somatic Sexology based out of Australia. And all of these pioneers who contributed to this body of work. And I, as I said, 20 years later, found my postpartum, I found myself several months into this body of work and in an intensive, and had never had my body, particularly my vulva, approached in such a conscious manner, in a manner so slow and so holistic and so beautiful and conscious, that I was like, this shouldn't be the exception. This shouldn't be extraordinary. This should be absolutely basic healthcare that we all can access. It just should be. And so I'm on a mission to make it accessible to as many women, men, couples, even, adolescents, children. These are life skills like consent, saying, no, you're standing too close to me. Can you please, can you please back up to 2 feet or something, like teaching. And there's somatic sex educators that are actually going into public schools and teaching children the value of consent and agency of their bodies. So yeah, this body of work should be basic healthcare, and it should be applicable to every human on the planet, including the littles, including this, all of them, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for making this accessible for our listeners, but also all of the people that you are reaching through your conscious care. And I hope that now that we've been able to really learn about what the possibilities are with this therapeutic approach, that you'll come back and we can get a little more focused on the hows and really examine this body of work as the necessity that it needs to be for experiencing whole health through life, but specifically in our lens is, this much needed postpartum window. I'm so appreciative of you and your brilliance and your heart, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Thank you for having me, Christine. So appreciate it.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Sacred Window podcast is brought to you by the Center for Sacred Window Studies. You can visit us to find out more about our online training and mentoring programs, plus resources and products for and about the sacred postpartum window at www.sacredwindowstudies.com. And our music is written and performed by Sarah Emmett. You can hear more of Sarah's music by visiting www.sarahemmett.bandcamp.com.